Thank you. I will be back at the book fair.
Okay, hi, my name is Ashley Richardson. I'm the youth ambassador. And hi, I have the privilege of introducing Mayor Richardson of Rigby, Idaho. He's going to address the terms of what essential and non-essential, what they mean, and how experts should decide these business policies. I think it's important to explain that Rigby flourished during the past year while other cities struggled and the liberty was threatened. Please welcome my father, Jason Richardson.
So the slide is supposed to be facetious. The expert that's me in all things, if you're wondering. I was born and raised in Northern California, and I did the appropriate mea culpas and document work to move to Idaho, where I was finally accepted years ago. Yes.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
It's because I'm from California.
No.
This happens all the time.
That's because I messed up. So I'm sorry your books are late coming to you, but I think all of you have them. If you look in your book, all the speakers have their name at the top of a page, so you can take notes on their page. They're supposed to be in order of the schedule, but Mayor Richardson here was supposed to speak later this afternoon, so you're going to have to turn a few pages to find the right page with his name at the top.
Our whole schedule is thrown off because Congressman Fulcher had an emergency in DC. So we'll be doing it, we'll just announce it to you so that you'll be kept up. But we'll see that what she's done and she put ahead. We'll see where the speaker is, find that speaker, you can note on it.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for letting me know. I wanted them to know where your page was, so
No problem.
they could take notes.
Thank you. So like I said, I'm from Northern California. My credentials include 8 years of university in order to get a bachelor's degree. For those of you who have gone to university, that doesn't make any sense. But I started here in Idaho and got 2 years, met a wonderful lady, and we got married, and she and I are both from California, so we went back to California, and they told me that none of the work that I had done up in Idaho counts toward the university system there. So I started over and did 4 more years, and then in California, to get a teaching certificate, you have to do 2 years of postgraduate work, which I did, and normally a decent idea is that you go ahead and get your master's degree when you're doing that. I neglected to finish one class and we moved back to Idaho. And so that's where I get my 8 years of school and a bachelor's degree. So the, and actually it's been super awesome. I've taught for over 20 years. I've been about 10 years in public service. 8 of those years have been as the mayor of Rigby. And you wonder how in the world did somebody 10 years ago get elected into a public office in a super conservative little town over in Eastern Idaho. When people would ask me where I'm from, I would tell them my dad's from Inca. And as long as they didn't ask any more questions, I was, my mother is, I think, 4th generation from Anderson Valley in Northern California. My dad is 4th generation from Inca, Idaho. And I've got deep roots in both places. If you know anything about Northern California, we've been trying to leave Southern California as its own state, at least since I was born. I know they just actually had a vote, and I don't know that it'll go anywhere, but I hope you forgive me, and I hope that you're willing to listen, even though I came from a communist state. So and I've just kind of something fun. In the last 5 months, we have visited 5 continents, and all of which had really interesting COVID restrictions. But that's not what this discussion is about. So the experts, 20 some odd years ago, I served a mission in Venezuela, and at that time, it was the richest country in South America, and everybody wanted to be there. I taught Venezuelans, Colombians, El Salvadorians, Mexicans, basically everybody was flocking to Venezuela because of how wealthy it was. And while I was there, there were difficulties with the monetary policy that was happening there, and there were difficulties with the oil industry being tied quite tightly with the government, and it gave an opportunity to a guy by the name of Chavez to promote socialism. And because of the errors that they were committing in their government at the time, that socialist thought, and it was Marxian in a lot of ways, it took a foothold, and he won a free and fair election as a Marxist, and Venezuela quickly deteriorated. My wife and I were able to go down in 2000, the year 2000, to visit some friends down there, and they had just had a storm that wiped out a lot of the poor homes up on the hill. In Venezuela, a lot of South America, the wealth is down in the valley, and you build ranchitos, these kind of brick or sometimes just plywood homes along the mountainside. Storm came in and wiped a bunch of those out. People didn't have anywhere to go, so the president at the time, Chavez, he confiscated all new construction along the Caribbean coast there, and he told those that had lost their homes that they could live in these big seaside apartments that were going up, and they're gorgeous. When we got there, the apartments had the skeleton on the inside, but no exterior walls, and the walls were hung with bed sheets and blankets. So you're going by, these are 14-story, 20-story buildings, hotels that they were going to be, with no exterior walls but blankets. And the people who had lost their homes in the storm about 6 months earlier were living in them. And the people who had built or started building those buildings had no say in ever getting their property back, because government owned the means of everything. And so those investors started pulling out. If you're going to invest millions of dollars and the government can take it away like that, you tend not to have confidence in that government, and you pull away. And so the economy started diving even more as foreign investors pulled out, and Chavez tanked it. Well, socialism, communism tanked it, really. Didn't matter who was in charge. And then you hit the teens. One of the policies that they instituted in Venezuela was that you weren't allowed to shop except on your assigned day. When it first started, you actually got 2 days a week that you were allowed to go into a store, and it's based on your identification number. And it told you which day you were allowed to go shopping. This is a picture that was taken in 2015 of one of the stores. You go in, you spend, my friends of mine would go down and get in line about 4 o'clock in the morning. You'd go down earlier, but they found that 4 o'clock, they would stand in line until the stores opened at 7, and they were about an hour back in line. And then you go in, and you were only allowed to buy a particular amount of each product. they had protein restrictions. So you were allowed to have 1 unit of protein per person in your family. And you're wondering, well, how would they know? Well, because when you checked out, you had to put your finger on a fingerprint reader. It would pull up your information and tell the register how much of each product you were allowed to buy. Now, this is NPR, and I pull from NPR on purpose in case you think that I'm, they're soft, shall we say, on socials. The checkout clerk scrutinized Valero's ID card and tells her to hold her index finger over the fingerprint scanner. The clerk scans the merchandise and then informs Annie that because of rationing, she can buy just 2 of those 3 cans of sardines. A friend of mine, they had a baby, and she had been using cloth diapers for the first week because it takes forever for them to actually register your baby into the system. After the first week, they knew they were allowed to go down and buy diapers. So she stood in line for 5 hours, went in, was able to buy 1 package of diapers. She knew what the restriction was. That 1 package of diapers is supposed to last a whole month. And so she went in, put her fingerprint on there, and they said, you can't buy the diapers. You don't have a baby. She's got the baby in her arms with the birth certificate from the hospital. They said, I'm sorry, but we can't enter that information. And they entered it at the hospital. I've already filled out the work. It's in your system. They checked the system again. No, I'm sorry. She wasn't able to buy diapers for 2 months for that baby. Now, some people are like, well, yes, my parents also use cloth diapers. It's not that big of a deal. They did that for years, right? Yes, but your parents had running water. They had water at all. She didn't have running water because that didn't work when I was there, when they were the richest country. It is what happens when government decides we can control this is that you lose your economy. When I put up there the expert, that government is not the expert. There is no person that can tell you how an economy is going to run. Being super wise, these experts decided, you know what is essential? Toilet paper. Now, we used to make fun of this back in 2015, that Venezuela, right? Because then it hit us. Venezuela didn't have toilet paper because the president decided that toilet paper needed to be regulated. It's a fundamental need for human beings. So toilet paper, you could only charge X amount. Well, the cost of producing toilet paper was X minus 3 or whatever it was. And so the toilet paper industry went to Chavez and said, listen, we're losing money. We have to shut down our factories. They did shut down their factories. And then Chavez said, okay, hold on, what's going on? Well, we can't buy the wood pulp in order to make the toilet paper for this price. So we sold it as long as we had savings, and then we had to shut down everything. So Chavez knew what to do. You lower the price of wood pulp. And so then the people that were actually out there cutting down trees and then selling that wood pulp, they realized, well, now they can't fund the logging industry. And so they shut down. There was no wood pulp to buy. It was cheap. It was really affordable, but it didn't exist anymore. And so then, of course, you lower the price of fuel and chainsaw repair, and then those people can't work anymore because, and it's just this circle. In 2017, the Venezuelan zoos started losing all their animals. People were stealing the animals in the zoo. The reason why is because they ran out of pets to eat. And so they raided the zoos. Okay? When government thinks it knows what it's doing, it ignores the fact that everything is dynamic. The only person that really understands your business is you. The only person that understands the needs of your family is you. That's the real expert. This was taken in 2015. It's a small protest that was happening for several months. The dire circumstances that they were in mobilized the country like crazy. I have a friend that he's asked me not to use his last name. It's the only name I know him by. I will do my best. His name is Felix, and he began a radio program about liberty, what it means to be a free people. And one of the things he had to talk about all the time is that to be free means that you have to be at risk, because nobody's going to take care of you except for you, which is a really tough thing to do. If you have gone on to college, or you're looking at it soon, or you're going away from your family, it is a little bit nerve-wracking because you're on your own. You have to provide everything that you're going to use. These guys have been in socialism for nearly 20 years, where the government just kept giving them more and more and more for free. And eventually, it got so ugly that it wasn't worth getting things for free. It was worth the risk. And he talked about that a lot in his radio program. And then the election happened. And amazingly, all these guys lost. We still don't know how that happened, because it probably didn't, right? The socialist president was re-elected miraculously. And my friend Felix on his radio program said, you know, we'll get him next time. We'll clean up the voting policies. We will clean up how we run things, and we'll get him next time, no violence. And he walked out of the radio station. The hood was thrown over his head. He was smashed in the face with a metal bar. It was taken over to a warehouse, and they beat him to death. They left his body in the street. He was found, taken to a hospital, and he wasn't quite dead. He was only mostly dead. That's a and anyway, he was in a coma for a couple of weeks there in the hospital. When he came out of his coma, there was a handwritten note on the side of his hospital bed that had his children's schedule of who drops them off at what school and at what time, who picked them up at what time and at what school. And it just said at the bottom, no more radio program. So he went home. They actually moved. That was a safe thing to have his children do. And he thought, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't put my family at risk. And then he said, I found it impossible to stay quiet. The fear I felt for my family could not become normal. So he started up his radio program again. And then he got a phone call while he's on his radio program. And they said, if you continue speaking out, your children will spend Mother's Day in the cemetery. He didn't know if that meant that they were going to take his children or his wife, but neither was acceptable. And so they had to run. And he went to the bank to pull out, he had plenty of savings. He went to the bank to pull out his money, but they had made a law in Venezuela that you could not withdraw cash from the bank at greater than $100 at any time. And so it didn't matter that he had all the savings. The government knew better. They knew that you probably didn't really need more than $100 cash, because you pay by a credit card and then they can watch what you're buying. Because if they watch what you're buying, they can better plan for what you need. So much exporting going on. And so he talked him into letting him take out $600 for some improvements that he was doing on the home. And with that $600 and one suitcase, he took his family of 6 across the Andes into Colombia. And he got out. In Colombia, it was illegal for him to work. So he couldn't provide for his family anymore. So he found a guy who made little toys, and he would make extra toys. The guy would give him half the profit that he was getting. And they scratched by. And then he was picked up by the Bogota News as a correspondent to explain what was going on in Venezuela. He was on the news quite often. He's got 2 postgraduate degrees. The same amount of schooling, he just looks better on paper. But he's an attorney of international law and a forensic scientist. So he was making some real impact in Bogota. And then an extradition notice came to take him out of Colombia, put him back in Venezuela. He was notified by the authorities that they had to do this extradition within the next 30 days. He had no money. He had no way to earn money. And he knew that being extradited to Venezuela would mean either life in prison or they were going to get. They'd already attempted it. Fortunately, long story short, this is he and I last summer. I should be able to play this. There we go. This was during COVID. Very epic video here. Slow motion for effect. So yeah, this is summer 2020. He's still ignoring oppressive government mandates and his safety measures. So who's the expert then? I can tell you, it doesn't matter how informed your government is, it doesn't understand your needs. It can't. Humans are way too dynamic. We are too individualized for anybody to really understand what needs to happen for us. Oops, there we go. So fast forward a few years. This is the Magic Valley News. March 25th, businesses that can stay open include grocery stores, healthcare facilities, utilities, gas stations, banks, laundromats, veterinary services, and others. We know now that includes liquor stores, right? What couldn't be open? Government agencies. You know, those things that you're required to use if you're going to build a fence in your yard. They are no longer open. You cannot ask permission to build a fence. You cannot ask permission to fix your chimney anymore because government services are shut down. Such as bars, gyms, hair salons must stop operating. Non-essential travel must stop as well. Also churches, right? Remember this. There's a mandate that, of course, the state liquor stores are essential, churches, non-essential. Guys, they don't know what they're doing. You cannot hand over your freedom. Even now we know that what the real risks of COVID were. There are some risks to COVID. But even at its worst, the risk to liberty is greater. You cannot. There is no such thing as a non-essential job. The dignity of working is always yours. It is essential that you have that ability to feed your own family, to live and provide for your own. In Rigby, we were actually on vacation, attempting to get into Mexico. A long story. But we ended up in Utah hiking the canyons when the mandate came out. I heard about the mandate, of course, right when it came out. And I called my police chief and I said, okay, so what actual mandate do we have that's coming down from the state? And he says, you know what, the governor said some things, but we're getting zero information on what we're required to do. Okay, so I called our sheriff. I said, so what are you hearing? And he had some words that I've never said those words actually, and I won't say them in front of you about what was going on. I tell you what, nobody is perfect, but our sheriff I sure appreciated what he did during this whole thing. Then I called ISP and I said, okay, so what are you guys doing? And I was told we are not going to enforce anything we're told not. Only education. If we see something And I was told some other things I probably shouldn't repeat about how they were going to handle this. And it really came down to, what am I going to do in my city? It really was a decision. This was the first time my entire time as mayor that I thought, you know what? I'm dang glad it was me instead of somebody else, because it makes a difference. The rest of the time, I'm going to do this job, right? You just make little decisions here and here. And this is the first time I thought, holy cow, what if it would have been somebody else? Because I saw what happened in neighboring towns. In our town, we didn't even declare an emergency because I refuse to take away rights of the people when it's not necessary. I can see, listen. In a time of war, when real existential threats are going on, where the government may go beyond what is necessary in their time. When the governor shut down the state, when our schools shut down schools, we didn't have a single case of COVID within 80 miles. And people were declaring emergencies. And it turns out the only thing you get with emergency powers is that you can do construction work without going out to bid. You can just pick something. What the heck do I need that for? What's a waste of money? Anyway, so we didn't declare an emergency, and I had several people say, oh, you know, how horrible that is. No, if you don't declare an emergency, then people kind of realize, you know, we can do this on our own, and you turn inward, which is where the real expertise is. I got called by a bar owner when I got back from our little jaunt in the Canyon Lands. And the bar owner begged me, please let us open. Now they weren't supposed to open until June, and where this is at the end of March. Said, please let us open. We were barely holding on. I need to make my mortgage, my house is dependent on this. And I said, just so you know, we haven't said you have to close. You can do, it's your business. You do what you need to do. The only thing I requested is I talked to every bar in town, every hair salon in town, and every business that I could come up with in my head that would be considered non-essential. I called them or walked in and knocked on doors and said, feed your families, make your mortgage, make this work. You know your customers better than I do. I don't know, what is it? Some of the stuff that they were telling hair salon, you have to like clean your scissors between each haircut. You know what hair salon people do between each haircut with their scissors? They clean them. They already did that. The state didn't even know that they had that requirement. They were like, okay, here's something else you have to do, clean your scissors. Okay. So they're having all of these mandates because they're not the expert. I know I've probably mentioned this before. You know who the expert is? You are the expert. And so I was telling them, you do what your customers need so they feel safe and so that you can continue working and building your clientele. And one of the hair salon people said, I've never heard anybody talk like you do. Thank you for trusting me enough to let me run my own life. And it offended me. Trusting her enough to let her, I don't trust her. I don't know her. It's none of my business to trust her or not trust her. She is going to do what is going to be the best for her clients. And so I didn't correct her. I didn't say, hey, listen. But I walked into one of the bars because another thing I've never done before. So I'm not the bar scene guy. But I walked into one of the bars that I knew had been struggling and was particularly nervous about the whole thing. And I had heard they had some great finger steaks. In case you're wondering, Dolly's Subway has great finger steaks. It's phenomenal. So I walked in. Nobody knows who I am, by the way, in Rigby. It's true. It is the greatest. We are doing government right. Nobody knows who I am. So I walked into the bar. And there are some guys that kind of turn and look at me. And I was like, I just need some finger steaks. Where do I order those? And they're like, oh, just right over there. And to this empty counter where evidently she comes out and takes your order. So I start walking over there, and another bar owner is sitting in a booth. And she looks up and she goes, "This is who I was just talking about." And so I turn to see who they're pointing at, and she's pointing at me. And she goes, "This is the mayor." And she explained how I had let them open. And everybody, I got this applause in a bar. It's new for me. And then the bar owner came out, and I said, "I just want some finger steaks. I just want to let you know that I'm glad you're here." And she got emotional. And she says, "Well, you're not going to pay for finger steaks here." And I explained to her that that's not good business practice. Where you're struggling, you should probably charge customers. And instead, the other bar owner said, "I'll pay for it." And so I got free finger steaks and probably secondhand cancer. But the reality is they made it, and you know, it was a struggle. They had to, because the one thing is I didn't want them putting it on Facebook. Please go ahead and feed your families, make your mortgage. Do not put a light on us and have us. Tampa did that. I don't know what happened. They backed off really quick. I wasn't going to back off, which meant that we were either going to have a boxing match of some sort, or we could just keep quiet. So we kept quiet, and we had expansion during COVID. We flourished. We have done very well during the last year. In fact, it's been in a lot of ways like non-existent for us. That doesn't mean that people didn't pass away and that we didn't have some real tragedy. We did. But the tragedy that's been going around the States has to do with people losing their jobs, mental health being crushed. It did get attention after I told them not to post it on Facebook. I did an all jobs or essential rally with the lieutenant governor and some other mayors and stuff. But it wasn't a protest. It was a plea to let us open up now. It was a plea to let's go ahead. We had enough data by this time that we knew what we could do. Let's take these restrictions off and operate out in the open. And it got noticed. PBS NewsHour called me up, and I was on the national news, which nobody knows that either, because even if they saw me, they're like, "That's a fake guy. You just get So one of the very, very clever things I said was, what I hear outside of the news are stories about neighbors who aren't able to pay their mortgages, car insurance, or health insurance. Also heard a lot about the schools, the difficulties that were going on. I'm a teacher by trade, about what's happening to our education. Fortunately, we started right back up in September, and we went full tilt. But that's not statewide. Over on this side of the state, there are schools that didn't. And in other states, there are schools that still aren't doing that. Still. There for every COVID case right now in the United States, it's in this time of the flu season, there would be 50 cases of flu. That's how low COVID is right now. It's 1/50th of the normal flu rate. And still, you have districts that are firmly against opening up. The Brookings Institute said to get a sense of the magnitude of $10 trillion of loss due to these learning education shortages. The sum is 1/10 of the global GDP, or half of the annual economic output of the United States. An estimated 7 million students are likely to drop out of school. That's what our experts have done. Because when you listen to only one expert, there's a doctor who's been a part of this, I'm sure you guys all know. considering the crowd that I'm speaking to. Dr. Fauci, and he is an expert in his field. And if you ask somebody who's an expert in epidemiology, are we safe if we, it doesn't matter what you say next, the answer is no. There's always risk. And that's your job to balance out. You need to be informed. If you're truly going to be an expert in your life, you have to be informed about risk. And you can do that by reading what the experts are putting out. What they can't do is find out what the details and the needs are in your life. Only you can do that. And your diaries are not published every day or week. Some of you, we'd all probably like to read it, but you're not publishing that. It's not going to happen. They cannot be experts in your life. You can, because they do publish things. But you have to be informed. Center for Disease Control. This is a year ago, August 14th. 40% of US adults reported struggling with mental health or substance use. These numbers are nearly double the rates we would have expected before the pandemic. The percentage of respondents who reported an increase was significantly higher among respondents aged 18 to 24 years old. This is an anxiety, start or increase of substance abuse, suicidality, and trauma or stress-related disorders. Double of what we were doing before. Again, we paid attention to one set of experts, and they gave us a shifting, because that's what science does. Science moves. But they gave us what their expertise called for, and then our job is to find out, okay, but what do the education experts say? What do the mental health experts say? What does my budget say? And then you get to decide. It's the only effective way for us to have a thriving society is through that liberty. This is on same episode, PBS NewsHour. Jobs, right? This guy's name is Juan Hernandez. So PBS asked me when they were first interviewing me, they said, we understand that employment has been, or business is really taking a hit. I said, yeah, it's been hard. They said, especially in the minority community. I said, I don't know that it's just the minority community. I don't really buy into that. Everybody has been taking a hit. Nobody's saying, let's go shop at stores owned by people like me. No, it's everybody's taking a hit. And he's like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step into that. It's like, can you lead me to some people that you know that are struggling? I said, yeah, I actually know that Yan Lin, her clothing store is struggling. Oh, tell us about it. Well, she's an immigrant from China. So there's that. They said, okay, anybody else? And I said, yeah, Juan Hernandez is an immigrant from Mexico. I see what's going on. All the people I knew, they were like immigrants. Anyway, Juan's Mexican restaurant, he had lost 75% of their business in just 2 months. 75% of their business. And that was because of government decisions that had been enforced on him. He just wanted to open. He put tables outside and then asked, can we serve outside? And eventually got permission to do that. But 75% of his business went away. Then you fast forward a year, and it's just he and his wife working at the store now, because when they lost 75% of their business, they couldn't keep their employees on. By the time business started ramping up, they said, hey, employees, you can come back and we'll pay you. We can do this again. And the employees said, you know what, I'm making an extra $600 a week. It's now down to $300 a week extra by staying on unemployment. And so now they were shut down by the government, and now the government's competing with them, and they can't get their employees back. And so it's just he and his wife running their restaurant that opens at 8 o'clock and closes at 9 o'clock. and cooking their beautiful carnitas takes 8 hours. They're exhausted and they can't bring their employees back. They're free to come back. There's no policy that restricts them. But the reality is the government in their expertise said, you know what, we need to give this money to them, and now they won't come back. Again, this expert movement has to be weighed out by you. This was Robert Winthrop was a Speaker of the House many years ago. He, strangely enough, his mentor was 50 years older than he was, and he is now the President of the United States. So that was an age joke on President Biden. Fell flat. I apologize. Probably should have designed that better. The reality is, in politics, and there's a great story. I really love the story that Ms. Hodge shares about being in the House. When you get into politics, people come to you and they say, I have this problem. And then you feel this encumbrance to say, okay, let me try to solve it. I'm going to try to solve that problem. And the reality is, I think most politicians are trying to do good by inventing new solutions. I just don't have confidence that you can do that very effectively in all aspects of life from a political standpoint. Most of the time, I think the correct answer is, what can I do to get out of the way so you can solve your own problems? But that doesn't always happen. And the reason that they want to solve it is because they're hired by you to be your representative, to be a government official. And then people like you come to them and say, hey, I need this problem solved. And so they try to come up with a way to get you a solution through government. But the reality is, freedom is dangerous. If you're going to be free, you're going to have to really find ways to solve your own problem. If government is in the way, I think it's a good time to go and talk about a solution from it. Robert Winthrop said this: men in the word must necessarily be controlled, either by the power within them or a power without them, outside of them, either by the word of God or by the strong arm of man, either by the Bible or the bayonet. You're going to be controlled. In a time where there is an unknown disease that is going through and people are dying with the disease, even from the disease, we do have a choice whether we're going to kind of pull back and show some wise caution, or whether we're going to need a government to come in and mandate that with the bayonet. My argument is that the government, even if it is going to do it with the bayonet, doesn't have the information necessary to know what your circumstance requires. In Rigby, we offered anybody that was in those high risk, actually we offered anybody, we didn't put a caveat on it. But if you were high risk or elderly or you had some problem, our police department volunteered to go around and deliver groceries or medicines, whatever you needed taken to your house, we would just do it. Just let us know. Now that works for Rigby. I don't know if that would work for other towns because I don't know other towns, but I do know Rigby. And so that's what we offer. We didn't need a full shutdown. We just needed to adapt with what we knew was right for our area. We didn't need to be ruled by the bayonet because we have neighbors who love their neighbors and are willing to reach out and help them. And you know what, you guys, if you want freedom, you've got to be moral. You have to. It has to come within. Benjamin Franklin said that as a society becomes more vicious and corrupt, it has more of a need of masters. I don't want masters. I don't want external controls. It means I have to not be corrupt and vicious. I've got to be a good person who looks out for my neighbor, who cares, who reaches out and serves. And then I can be ruled from it. 8 years ago, 2014, I was an amateur when I raised my hand and swore an oath to the Constitution. 8 years later, I have no divine gift of magnanimous virtue. I am still a regular dude who has no idea what I'm doing. It's just the reality. I think Carrie Hanks didn't like that line one time when I did. She goes, I have a lot of experience. I have experience and I have no idea. But I don't pretend to want to rule over somebody else's life. I am 8 years more rich in my understanding of what needs to happen in Rigby. It does not make me an expert. It just makes me that little bit more informed for other people to get information so they know what to do in their own. When I raised my hand, actually, that moment that you see in this picture, instantly, I was authorized by the state of Idaho to carry a concealed weapon. 10 minutes before this, had I carried a concealed weapon, I could have been arrested. But because I had been elected, I got this superpower. I was suddenly able to do that safely. You guys, and fortunately, I think you guys, all three of these representatives were actually in the Idaho legislature when they took that out and said all Idahoans can do that. There is no magic to somebody who's been elected. There is no magic knowledge that comes to a politician. They are not the experts, you are the experts. And in order to maintain that freedom, we need to also be courageous. This is Matos again. This is just taken recently. I'm doing this. If you think, wow, you look skinny, I'm not. I just breathed in. He is an inspiration to me for what he fought for. And he and I both asked the same question. Should he be in Venezuela fighting still? There are not easy answers to this. I don't know. He doesn't know. He wants his country free. He wants to go home. But he also wanted his children to be alive. He wanted a living wife. And so there are difficult decisions that you're going to have to make. There is no way a government can make a decision like that for you. That has to be personal. When we look at what we went through on what is essential, what is not essential, we, I think, made some significant errors, and we can't do it again. I am not one to condemn harshly those who I think took missteps, because I 8 years after I started being mayor, I know how ineffective I can be in my thoughts. But I think we should learn. I think we're ready now to accept that we made mistakes and go forward. So the expert, in my incredible wisdom, I would say that these four things: no individual's dignity is non-essential. Experts are myopic. They only see their little tiny frame. And individuals have to weigh all the data that comes in. Only you can be the expert of your own life and your conscience. I would just tell you, rely on those divine sources, not on the shifting opinions of man, because there's only one perfect source. So you gotta turn to him. And I will stand for questions if there are. Thank you.
So you said something earlier that has me a little concerned. And as an expert, with all that experience as mayor and your 8 years college, in addition to 2 masks, should I also be wearing a hairnet to prevent the spread? Because if they have to clean their scissors to prevent the spread, should I be wearing a hairnet?
Yeah, the other thing that I guess there's a new thing where you can buy seatbelts for like out of car safety. You just put it on, you walk through the park with a seatbelt on. We were just in Ecuador. We just got back from Ecuador, and so we're at Quito's at 11,000 feet, and so I couldn't breathe anyway without a mask. And we were working with people who had 3 masks, like a cloth, like the blue white diaper, and then a KN95. And I just, wow, and it's funny how much that has changed, of course, because the experts, when you follow the science, you will be shifting because that's what science does, right? Hypothesis, experimentation, a new hypothesis, and it just wanders. It's kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
Do you have any opposition, such as medical personnel who, assume they know everything because they have MD after their name?
They had opposition, I guess. They really, I didn't really get a hold. I asked for data, and I would get no response. And I didn't want to, like, I didn't make it public. All of it's on text. So there was quiet behind the scenes, like, show me the data, show me the data, show me the data, and they would never get a response. And so we just kind of quietly went on doing our thing. At no time was I pressed from the state to do anything.
Jason, would you tell them about the rodeo?
Oh, yeah, so we have Stampede Days every June. And the question came in one of our meetings of, are we gonna do the Stampede Days? And are we gonna do the high school rodeo? I was like, yes, we're gonna do this. It's outside for crying out loud. We didn't know at the time what how, like now we know with youth, it's nothing, right? That's not quite nothing. I don't want to keep having to throw that caveat. But, we went and had the rodeo, and then we got phone calls from other cities throughout the state saying, hey, we're not allowed to have rodeos. Can we go up there to have a rodeo? It was like, bring it, and some rental money. And the only exception that I made on that was that if our local kids were using the facility for something, then the answer would be no, they come first because they're our local kids. But we had several rodeos throughout the entire summer from other parts of the state that came out and use our facility. And I love that those youth had a place to go to. It's great. Please.
I have a question, but I just want to say, I'm just so emotional about this. My son was looking for a place for them to get married. They've been dating for 3 years. She was graduating, so they needed a place to get married, and they got married in Rigby because that was the only open place in our region, basically. So I really appreciated that, and it's good to hear the backstory on that. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys. I appreciate you listening to me, and I really do. I feel strongly about liberty and the Constitution, and I believe deeply that our founders wrote rules to restrict government because they understand the weaknesses of human beings when we get power, and we need to continue to trust in the individual over the. Thank you. That's great. And that's my mentor. So.
I would like to look at